In the rain-soaked twilight of Interstate 84 near Portland, Oregon, a moment of chaos unfolds as a bobcat is violently thrown from a moving car. For veterinary nurse Olivia Adams, already weary from a long shift at the clinic, this shocking scene forces her to confront the cruelty of the roads and of human neglect toward wildlife. With every second, as the injured wildcat struggles on the roadside, fate hangs in the balance. What happens next not only redefines her understanding of compassion, but also sparks a chain of events that will forever change the lives of those caught between the human world and the wild. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories.
The April rain fell in gentle sheets over Interstate 84, just outside Portland, Oregon. The windshield wipers of Olivia Adams' aging Honda Civic swept methodically back and forth as she headed home after a 12-hour shift at East Portland Veterinary Clinic. At 32, Olivia had been a veterinary nurse for nearly a decade, but the emotional toll of the day's emergency cases, a Labrador with bloat, a kitten with a severe respiratory infection, and an elderly beagle whose time had finally come, weighed heavily on her shoulders. Traffic moved steadily despite the weather, headlights glowing like fireflies through the misty evening. Olivia rolled her neck, trying to release the tension that had built up during the day. She was looking forward to a hot shower, a glass of wine, and the company of her own rescue animals, a three-legged cat named Tripod and an anxious greyhound mix called Whisper. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden flash of brake lights ahead. A black pickup truck swerved erratically across lanes, causing a cascade of honking horns. As Olivia slowed, she caught a glimpse of movement, something tossed from the passenger window of the truck. At first, she thought it might be trash, but then the small form tumbled violently across the asphalt, coming to rest at the edge of the shoulder. What the? Olivia's heart lurched as the truck accelerated and disappeared around a bend. Without hesitation, she hit her hazard lights and pulled over, her veterinary instincts kicking in. Grabbing the emergency medical kit she always kept in her car, a habit from years of unexpected animal encounters, she stepped out into the rain. What she saw made her gasp. A small bobcat, no more than 6 months old, lay trembling on the gravel shoulder. Its tawny fur was matted with blood along one side, and its right hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. The wildcat's amber eyes were wide with terror, pupils dilated to black pools. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered, immediately recognizing the species. Even injured, the young predator could be dangerous. But the alternative, leaving it to suffer or be hit again, was unthinkable. As cars whizzed by, sending sprays of water onto the shoulder, Olivia carefully opened her trunk and retrieved an old blanket she kept for emergencies. She knew that approaching a wounded wild animal, especially one with the natural weaponry of a bobcat, violated every safety protocol she'd been taught. Yet something in the creature's frightened eyes compelled her forward. Keeping low and moving slowly, she spoke in the same soothing tones she used with frightened domestic animals at the clinic. "It's okay, little one. I'm not going to hurt you." The bobcat tried to rise, hissing weakly, but collapsed back down, its strength depleted by shock and injury. Olivia seized the moment to carefully drape the blanket over the animal, swiftly bundling it to restrain its claws and teeth while leaving space for it to breathe. Just as she secured the makeshift wrap, a pickup truck, not the one that had hit the bobcat, pulled over behind her car. Olivia tensed, suddenly aware of her vulnerability on the highway's edge. A tall man in a neon safety vest and construction helmet stepped out, rain beating on his broad shoulders. "You need help, ma'am?" he called over the noise of the traffic. Olivia adjusted her grip on the bundle, which had begun to squirm weakly. "I'm a vet nurse. Someone threw this bobcat from their vehicle. It's badly injured." The man approached cautiously, his expression changing from concern to surprise as he peered at the bundle in her arms. A bobcat? Are you sure? Positive, Olivia replied. I need to get it to the Northwest Wildlife Care Center. It's about 20 minutes from here. The man seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. I'm Benjamin. Benjamin Foster. I do highway construction work. Just finished my shift. He gestured to the small wildlife container. That doesn't look secure enough for a wild animal, even a young one. It's all I have, Olivia admitted, feeling the bobcat's rapid heartbeat against her arm. I'm Olivia Adams, by the way. Benjamin ran a hand through his damp hair. I've got a secure toolbox in my truck bed. We could line it with that blanket, drill some air holes. It would be safer than trying to hold it. Olivia hesitated, glancing down at the injured cat. The bobcat's breathing was rapid and shallow, signs of shock that needed immediate attention. But Benjamin was right. Trying to drive while restraining a wild animal, even an injured one, was dangerous for both of them. Okay, she agreed. But we need to be quick. Together, they hurried to Benjamin's truck. While he emptied a metal toolbox and drilled several holes in the lid with a power drill from his work equipment, Olivia monitored the bobcat and made a phone call. Dr. Martinez? It's Olivia Adams. I've got an emergency, a juvenile bobcat hit by a car on I-84. She paused, listening. Yes, I know the protocols. No, I couldn't leave it. It's got a fractured leg for sure, probably internal injuries. We're on our way. By the time she hung up, Benjamin had prepared the makeshift transport container. With extreme care, they transferred the bundled bobcat into the toolbox lined with the blanket. I'll follow you, Benjamin said, surprising Olivia. 2 vehicles are better than 1 in case of trouble. The 20-minute drive to the Northwest Wildlife Care Center seemed to stretch for hours. In her rearview mirror, Olivia could see Benjamin's truck following steadily behind, his headlights a reassuring presence in the rainy darkness. Occasionally, she heard faint scratching from the secured toolbox on her passenger seat, but mostly the bobcat remained quiet, a worrying sign that could indicate worsening shock. When they finally arrived at the Wildlife Center, a plain building set back from the road and surrounded by tall Douglas firs, Dr. Elena Martinez was waiting at the service entrance with a proper transport cage and 2 assistants. Bring it straight to the exam room, she instructed, her experienced gaze taking in the makeshift container. And you'd better both get checked for scratches or bites, just in case. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. The bobcat, determined to be a male approximately 5 to 6 months old, was carefully sedated so that Dr. Martinez could assess its injuries. Olivia assisted where she could, falling naturally into her role as a veterinary nurse despite her exhaustion. Benjamin waited awkwardly in the lobby, declining Olivia's suggestion that he could go home. I'd like to know if he makes it, he said simply. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged from the examination room, her expression was guardedly optimistic. He's got a clean fracture of the right tibia, several contusions, and moderate internal bruising. The good news is there's no sign of spinal damage or significant head trauma. The next 72 hours will be critical, but with proper care, he has a chance. Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her. What about his age? Is he old enough to survive in the wild if he recovers? The wildlife veterinarian nodded thoughtfully. He's young, but not a kid. Based on his dentition and size, I'd estimate he's just past the age when he would naturally separate from his mother. If the leg heals properly and he maintains his wild instincts during rehabilitation, release would be possible. And if not, Benjamin asked from where he stood by the lobby window, watching the rain. Dr. Martinez's expression sobered. Then we'd have to consider humane euthanasia or permanent sanctuary placement. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to see if he survives the next few days. As they left the center well after midnight, Olivia found herself walking alongside Benjamin to their vehicles. Thank you for stopping, she said, suddenly aware of how bizarre the evening's events had been. Most people wouldn't have. Benjamin shrugged, his broad shoulders moving under his rain-dampened jacket. Most people wouldn't have pulled over for a wild predator in the first place, he pointed out with a small smile. Even a small one. Olivia felt her cheeks warm despite the cool night air. I just couldn't leave him there. Will you check on him tomorrow? Benjamin asked, keys jingling in his hand. Definitely. I'm off work, so I was planning to come by in the afternoon. Would you mind if I called to get an update? He hesitated, then added, or I could meet you here, if that's not weird. Olivia found herself smiling for the first time that evening. It's not weird. I'd appreciate the company, actually. They exchanged phone numbers, and Olivia drove home with a strange mixture of emotions swirling through her. Concern for the Bobcat, anger at whoever had intentionally harmed it, and an unexpected warmth at Benjamin's kindness. The next morning, after a few hours of restless sleep, Olivia opened her laptop to find her social media notifications exploding. Confused, she scrolled through dozens of messages until she found the source. A post from the Northwest Wildlife Care Center about the rescued bobcat, including a mention of local veterinary nurse Olivia Adams and Good Samaritan Benjamin Foster, who had saved the animal from certain death on the highway. The post had been shared hundreds of times overnight, with comments ranging from outrage at the perpetrator to praise for the rescue. Olivia's phone rang as she was still processing this unexpected attention. Have you seen the news? Benjamin's deep voice came through the speaker. Just the social media stuff, Olivia replied. Is it on actual news too? Channel 8 picked it up this morning. They're calling the Bobcat Cedar because of where he was found, near Cedar Creek exit. They're also reporting that police are looking for the driver based on partial plate information from a traffic camera. Olivia sat up straighter. They have footage? Apparently. The reporter said they're looking for a black Ford F-150 with Oregon plates. The driver was allegedly seen deliberately swerving toward the animal. A cold anger settled in Olivia's stomach. As a veterinary professional, she had seen her share of animal cruelty, but the deliberate nature of this act struck her as particularly heinous. By the time Olivia and Benjamin met at the Wildlife Center that afternoon, the story had gained even more traction. Wildlife advocates had set up a donation page for Cedar's medical expenses, which had already raised several $1,000s. The center's phone rang constantly with people inquiring about the bobcat's condition. Dr. Martinez looked simultaneously overwhelmed and pleased by the attention when she met them in a quiet back office. Cedar's holding his own, she said, using the name that had been adopted by the media. His vitals are stable, and we've set the leg. He's eating a little, which is a good sign. Can we see him? Olivia asked. The veterinarian hesitated. Normally, we minimize human contact with wildlife patients to prevent habituation. But since you're a vet nurse and already involved with the case, just observe from outside the recovery enclosure, please. She led them to a quiet room where several enclosures housed recovering wild animals. In a large cage with a privacy screen covering most of the front, they could just make out the small form of the bobcat. Cedar lay on his side on a soft blanket, his injured leg immobilized in a cast. His eyes were half closed, but his ears twitched at their approach. He's beautiful, Benjamin murmured, keeping his voice low. Olivia nodded, studying the bobcat with professional interest. Even injured and sedated, there was an undeniable wildness about him, a reminder that he belonged to the forests and mountains, not the human world. The orthopedic specialist believes he'll regain full use of the leg, Dr. Martinez explained. The real question is whether he'll maintain enough of his wild nature during recovery to be releasable. As they watched, Cedar's amber eyes fully opened, fixing on them with an unblinking stare. Despite his weakened state, there was a fierce intelligence in that gaze that made Olivia's breath catch. I think he still has plenty of wild in him, she said softly. Over the next few days, Cedar's story continued to captivate the public. Local newspapers ran features on the rescue, and wildlife conservation groups used the incident to highlight the broader issues of habitat loss and human-wildlife conflict in Oregon's rapidly developing areas. 5 days after the rescue, the story took another turn when police announced they had identified the driver who had hit Cedar. 19-year-old Connor Parker was arrested and charged with animal cruelty after a friend who had been in the vehicle came forward, disturbed by Parker's actions and the subsequent media attention. According to police reports, Parker had deliberately swerved to hit the Bobcat, which had been crossing the highway, then circled back around to make sure it was dead. When he saw it was still alive, he allegedly threw it from the moving vehicle onto the opposite side of the highway, where Olivia had found it. The news of Parker's arrest brought a fresh wave of media interest. Olivia, who had been visiting Cedar daily to check on his progress, found herself reluctantly drawn into interviews and statements. Benjamin, despite his initial shyness, stood steadfastly beside her through the unwanted attention. "I'm not comfortable with all this," Olivia confessed to him one evening as they sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop near the wildlife center. "I didn't rescue Cedar for the publicity." Benjamin nodded, his hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. "Me neither. But maybe there's a way to use the attention for something good." Over the following week, as Cedar continued to heal and regain strength, Olivia and Benjamin worked with the Wildlife Center to channel the public interest into education about local wildlife. They helped organize an online fundraiser that not only covered Cedar's medical expenses, but also raised money for the center's broader rehabilitation work. Meanwhile, Cedar's rehabilitation progressed faster than anyone had expected. By the third week, he was moving around his enclosure with increasing confidence, the cast on his leg replaced with a lighter brace. His wild temperament remained intact. He hissed and swiped at caretakers, refused to eat if humans were visible, and showed no signs of the habituation that could make release impossible. "He's a fighter," Dr. Martinez told Olivia during one of her visits. "And he's healing remarkably well. We're starting to discuss release options." Planning a predator release was complex. The team needed to find an area with suitable habitat, adequate prey, and minimal human presence. They also needed to be sure Cedar could hunt effectively with his healing leg. "There's a protected area in the Mount Hood National Forest where we've successfully released rehabilitated bobcats before," Dr. Martinez explained as she showed Olivia and Benjamin maps in her office. "It's far enough from residential areas to minimize conflict, but still within the natural range for the species in this region." As the release date approached, Olivia found herself experiencing unexpected emotions. She had formed no bond with Cedar. He remained every inch the wild animal, watching humans with wary hostility, but she felt invested in his journey. She had seen him at his most vulnerable and had committed weeks to ensuring his recovery. The thought of him disappearing into the forest created a bittersweet ache. Benjamin seemed to understand without her having to explain. "You want to know if he'll be okay," he said as they walked together through a park near Olivia's apartment, a habit they developed over the weeks of Cedar's recovery. "But not knowing is probably the point. He's wild. He's supposed to live beyond our watching." Olivia smiled, struck by the simple wisdom in his words. Over the past month, she had come to appreciate Benjamin's thoughtful nature, his gentle strength, and his unexpected sense of humor. What had begun as a chance encounter on a rainy highway had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a friendship teetering on the edge of something more. The morning of Cedar's release dawned clear and cool, the early June sun casting long shadows through the trees of the Mount Hood National Forest. A small group had gathered for the occasion. Dr. Martinez and 2 wildlife technicians, a representative from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Olivia and Benjamin, and a single journalist who had been permitted to document the release for educational purposes. Cedar was transported in a secure carrier, covered with a light cloth to minimize stress. When they reached the selected release site, a clearing near a stream, surrounded by dense forest, Dr. Martinez gathered everyone for final instructions. "We'll place the carrier here, with the opening facing the forest," she explained. "Once we're all at a safe distance, I'll use this extension tool to open the door remotely. No one moves or speaks until Cedar has left the area completely. Understood. Everyone nodded, excitement and emotion palpable in the morning air. As they retreated to the designated observation point about 50 yards away, Olivia felt Benjamin's hand slip into hers. She squeezed it gratefully, her throat tight with emotion. Dr. Martinez positioned herself with the extension tool, waiting until everyone was settled before carefully removing the cloth cover from the carrier. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a subtle movement. Cedar's face appeared at the opening, his distinctive ear tufts and facial markings now familiar to all of them. The Bobcat paused, seemingly assessing his surroundings. His amber eyes scanned the trees, the undergrowth, the distant humans. Olivia held her breath. With the sudden fluid movement that characterized his species, Cedar bolted from the carrier. He paused once, about 20 feet from the carrier, and looked back. For a brief moment, it seemed he was looking directly at Olivia and Benjamin. Then, with a flick of his tail, he disappeared into the underbrush, the dappled forest shadows embracing him. Silence hung over the group until Dr. Martinez finally spoke. "Successful release," she said, her professional tone not quite masking her own emotion. "Excellent movement, no signs of pain or hesitation." The small gathering broke into spontaneous applause, quickly hushed by the wildlife officials who reminded them they were in a natural habitat. As they packed up their equipment and prepared to leave, Olivia found herself lingering, staring into the forest where Cedar had vanished. "He'll be okay," Benjamin said softly, standing beside her. "I know," Olivia replied. And somehow, she did know. Despite the cruelty that had brought Cedar into their lives, despite the challenges of his recovery, the Bobcat had retained the essential wildness that defined him. His release wasn't just a happy ending. It was a restoration of the natural order, a small piece of rightness in a world that often felt chaotic. As they walked back to the vehicles, Olivia realized how profoundly the experience had changed her. What had begun as an instinctive act of compassion had evolved into a journey that challenged her professionally and personally. She had confronted the darker aspects of human nature in Connor Parker's deliberate cruelty, but she had also witnessed extraordinary kindness and dedication from strangers who had rallied around a wild creature in need. "What now?" Benjamin asked as they reached the parking area. The question seemed to encompass more than just their immediate plans. Olivia looked back toward the forest one last time, then turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about that, actually. The Wildlife Center has been asking if I'd be interested in coming on part-time as a consultant for their medical cases." Benjamin's face brightened. "Are you going to do it?" "I think so," she nodded. "What about you? Going back to just construction work?" He shook his head, a smile spreading across his face. "Actually, I signed up for the center's volunteer program. Basic habitat maintenance and construction at first, but they said there might be opportunities for training in wildlife rescue eventually." Olivia felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the strengthening morning sun. "So we'll still be seeing each other?" "I was hoping so," Benjamin said, his normally confident voice slightly uncertain. "Maybe not just at the center?" As they drove away from the forest, following the Wildlife Center's van down the winding mountain road, Olivia glanced at the rearview mirror. The trees where Cedar had found his freedom were already fading from view, but the impact of his journey remained vividly present. 6 months later, motion sensor cameras placed by researchers in the Mount Hood National Forest captured a remarkable image. A healthy male bobcat marking territory near a stream. Cedar, identifiable by the faint irregularity in his right hind leg and the distinctive pattern of his facial markings. The photograph made its way to Dr. Martinez, who shared it with Olivia and Benjamin during one of their regular volunteer shifts at the center. By then, their relationship had deepened beyond friendship, bound by the shared experience of that rainy night on the highway and everything that followed. They stood together, Looking at the image of the wild cat they had saved, his fierce independence restored. He made it, Olivia whispered, joy and pride mingling in her voice. Benjamin slipped his arm around her waist. Was there ever any doubt? He's resilient, like someone else I know. Outside the center's windows, autumn leaves drifted down from maple trees planted by volunteers. Inside, in the rehabilitation area, new wild patients received care from a dedicated team that now included both Olivia and Benjamin. And deep in the forest, Cedar roamed free, his story continuing beyond human sight, but never beyond human impact. A living testament to the difference compassion can make, even for the wildest among us.